Okay, thank you everybody for joining tonight. This is the May 22nd Board of Finance regular meeting. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to the first item on the agenda after opening, which is the public speak. Eric, you want to go around and check? Looks like we have Celeste and Linda.
Sure. First up on my screen is Linda Fish.
All set.
Okay. Item number 2, Celeste Willard.
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. Phone number ending in 2020.
That's Louise.
Got it.
That's me.
Okay. Then that is everybody I have on my screen.
Okay, we'll go ahead and go on to item 3, which is changes or additions to the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or additions to the agenda to propose?
Mark, I do. I knew we were going to discuss the letter that Celeste had sent to us, right, requesting the change of how they wanted to. I believe
about the
I don't have. Sorry.
Expenditure policy.
Well, I know we're talking about that, but I mean, there was also the letter that she sent right before the town meeting, asking, and I'm sorry, I meant to print it out, but asking how they wanted the money to be allocated more towards, I think, you know, the more pressing item now than the parking lot. And I see Celeste is nodding in agreement. We probably should have had that on the agenda, but can we add that somewhere? I'm not sure if did we have to take action on it, or are we just I knew she submitted it to us. She's here tonight. I knew we just wanted to kind of talk about it.
I'm sorry if I'm turning my head sideways because the letter is scanned sideways and I've opened it up on my email and I don't have an easy way to.
Right click, you should be able to rotate it. But
Yep.
Oh, this is within the Outlook. This is within the Outlook thing, so it's not clearly as clear.
It's the request to put their leftover 103K into the capital account.
Right.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joanne.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Just so that we acknowledge it tonight, wherever we want to put it at the beginning, maybe, or something, but.
I'm still trying to figure out the. I'm actually pretty good at Adobe Acrobat. But you're right, Rob. I didn't know that. Right click shortcuts. That's good. So I think, Joanne, what you would want to do then is make a motion to add to the agenda the request from the Board of Ed to move the surplus into the capital fund.
Sure.
I guess we did. Yeah, I guess we did discuss this at the last meeting. Okay.
No, I think it arrived.
Yeah, after
that meeting.
Same day or after. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I apologize.
right.
Repeat the beginning of that. I'm just adding.
So I think what we would need is a motion to add to the agenda.
Right.
The request from the Board of Education to move the surplus into the AES Capital Fund.
All right. Can we act on what I'll make a motion to add to the agenda. Do I have to pick where I'm adding it under?
It would be under new business, so it would be 5B.
Okay, under 5B, the letter from the Board of Education acting on the ability to move the surplus funds into the AES Capital Fund.
Okay, do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Rob. Anybody? We have any discussion? Did everyone receive that email? I think we all did.
Yes.
I found it right away.
It looks like everyone got it. Yeah, okay. So if there's no discussion, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed? Any abstentions? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and add that to the agenda as item 5B. Okay, any other additions or changes to the agenda, Eric?
Mark, I have one. I would like to request the Board of Finance consider an additional appropriation in the amount of $2,000 for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2024. And the account that would be funded would be 4214 Community Center, 318-601-56220 electricity. And when we get to that, I'll explain why we're doing it that way and what we're accomplishing.
So what I would suggest is that we have a motion potentially to add in agenda item under 5C, which is new business, which to discuss the account for electricity. For what sub area is it?
The community center.
4214 Community Center.
Okay. Anybody
Take it
want
away
to
with
make that
saying,
motion?
I so move. So I'm not
Okay.
repeat all that.
Anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
I'll second it.
I heard Bill first. Thank you very much. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. We'll add that to the agenda as item 5C. Okay, and we'll get to the details then. Any other changes or additions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to old business. So the first item is the review of the policy for the AES capital expenditures. I sent earlier to you today, and I apologize for not sending it earlier. Rob had sent it to me Monday. But this is the draft of a proposed policy that came out of the Board of Education. I have not had a lot of time to review it. And I'm sure that you haven't had a lot of time to review it, many of you also. So we can certainly discuss it at this point. I think that the first section of that policy, and I don't have it in front of me right now, I do, but it's without referring to it, it's probably moot because
Can you
we've
share it,
already,
Mark?
huh?
Would you like me to share it?
Mhm.
I have it up too. It doesn't matter.
You can, I mean, you certainly can, I can too.
Yeah, the first part of it does lead off with what we're going to discuss later, which is the moving of the 103K.
Yeah.
Well, section
So-
B does.
So
B.
section 1A is moved because that was already passed through the board, through the
Yep.
agenda or through the budget.
Although-
referendum.
Well, there is a second piece to it. It talks because it says thereafter. So you could redraft it, but it accounts for not just the original 100,000, but this is and thereafter may choose to. So it
We
also
already know we
provides-
can do that. We already know we can do that. That's the power vested in the board. of
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's really a formality.
Yeah, keep it simple. It's as simple as we can. So I honestly, my first thought reviewing this is that section A can be removed in its entirety, assuming we approve the second part of that, which is section B tonight, which is the removal or the transfer of the excess funds to the capital
Yep.
fund. If we do that, then this whole section can go. Right?
More or less. I mean, I still think we want to have some sentence in there about how the Board of Ed can choose to deposit money in the future. But into this specific fund. But
Yeah, we
again,
can
it can be substantially redrafted. You're right.
It just simplifies, and I think the simpler the better. We all know that they can request that at any point, right? So,
I think they just wanted to formalize it, but that's
yeah, it's not a bad idea, actually, thinking about
Yeah.
probably not
And
a bad idea.
the other thing you guys might notice, is the change of name. I think this came out of the Board of Ed discussions. And I think the concern, as I understand it, was that they feel they're responsible for the building and the grounds, and they feel like naming it 35 School Road makes it clear that the fund is for the building and the grounds, not just maybe the school building itself. So that's the reason for the name change.
Rob, thank you for addressing that. That just stuck right out at me and
Yeah.
I always.
I was
assumed it
puzzled too,
was-
but Shannon explained it and I was like, okay, that makes a certain amount of sense.
So we won't refer to it as the AES capital.
AES.
It's just easier, the AES capital, rather
Uh,
than,
I agree with you, and there's another way to do this, obviously. I mean, I took Shannon's draft and stuck it in front of you guys because, it's not like I sat down and redrafted this thing. She spent a lot of time on it, and I was having massive car trouble late last week. So I was all up in that and didn't really have the time to sit down and say, here, let me redline this and change it. The other way you could do it is still call it the AAS Capital Fund and just define AAS Capital Fund in a way that makes it very, very clear that it applies to building, grounds, etc., everything. You can do either
I
way.
don't- I just think it looks cleaner, it looks better, it lets everyone know what it, but I appreciate all the time and effort both of you have put into it, so I'm not criticizing. I just think it's easier for the community at large to understand too, how we're trying to transition and for them to have this. And I would always support it, including the grounds too, the whole, but that's
Yeah, I
just,
think that's the intent. It was just a
Yeah.
question of clarity.
yeah, thank you.
No,
You
and
know-
I agree with Joanne, just the fact that some people be like, 35 School Road, what is that? Because people are used to hearing AES,
Yeah.
so.
Exactly.
All right.
No,
I mean,
we're
we
really
could do
trying
this
to
on a
push,
redraft.
the togetherness and it's just feedback we can give to Shannon, or you can provide to Shannon of why we felt
I will.
strong. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So I'm sorry, what are people suggesting?
To name it AAS, they like to name the AAS Capital Fund rather than 35 School Road. What
Well,
I was saying is, in order to address the Board of Ed's concern, the other way to do it is you call it the AAS Capital Fund and then you drop a definition. And you have that definition, AAS Capital Fund means blah, 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 blah. And in that, you make it very, very clear that it applies to building, grounds, everything that the BOE is responsible for upkeep of.
Yeah, I would suggest that would make sense for, Shannon's an attorney, right? So wants to make sure that the details are there. So first of all, this is not a binding agreement. This is an agreement that is, just a policy and principle that, any of the three boards could in theory, decide not to follow at any given time. But that being said, I do think that it makes sense to, be clear in our language. Now, one of the things, if you look at the plot lines, I'm not sure that it is wise for us to restrict us so much to the 35 School Road survey lines. Because I may be wrong, but just looking at it in the quick look that I took, it looked like it may actually, some of the playing fields and some of the other areas out back behind the school may actually not be part of the 35 School Road property. So I'd be a little concerned about limiting that fact, because I think then that potentially limits the Board of Ed about the things that they would do. I doubt that it's going to make that much difference, but I think that we would be better served by a little broader definition of what 35 School Road actually, or the AES Capital Fund is. And by defining it as, capital improvements to the AES properties, including 35 School Road, would probably be better served for both the school district and the town. So that would kind of be my thought. And I'm going to suggest we don't necessarily vote on this whole thing today. We could, but that would be my one proposed. I don't think we want to box ourselves into a corner by limiting it to 35 School Road and having somebody challenge it in the future.
I hear what you're saying. And no, I mean, I wasn't thinking we'd vote on this tonight because I don't think a lot of people had enough time to look at it and think through everything that they could come up with that they might have an issue with. There's very much an either or choice at the end of this thing because Shannon and I were debating back and forth. She came up with this idea of this kind of advisory committee that would administer this fund. And if it was two from each of the main boards, Board of Finance, Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen, this obviously sets up a tie scenario. So we had a difference of opinion, not a strong one necessarily, on how to break a tie. My preference was to go to a 7-member committee by grabbing somebody from CIP that wasn't an overlap. She came up with a different mechanism. So everybody should kind of look at that at the end of this and chew on it and think if you have a brilliant idea that we didn't think of, by all means. And then, other than that, just come up with what you might prefer, what you think would work more smoothly. Just so that we don't end up in 3-3 ties. And then, I mean, what good does that do?
Yep.
Mark, just one point to what
Yep.
you've already said. The elementary school's entire septic system is not on the property that's designated
Yeah,
35 Wheeling.
That's a classic example. That's kind of what I was concerned about. Now, I didn't know exactly where the septic system was, but I knew there was an issue because it kind of comes to this, there's an angle associated with that. Okay, good to know. So something to consider, good, and I think we
We'll
should.
definitely want to get that in the definition.
Well, I think we have to broaden the definition.
Definitely.
No.
Definitely. Because the
Again, I don't
intent, I mean,
think-
I think we all have
everyone-
the same intent, but we just don't want to, I think you're absolutely right. We don't want
Right.
to accidentally draw a boundary around this thing that
And
actually
have
handcuffs us.
somebody else play hardball with the definitions.
Yeah, for no good reason. Right,
Was not
exactly.
intended, right?
Right.
Okay. Do we have other comments on the proposed policy?
It just doesn't seem that logical to create another board when you already have CIP, whose mission it is to do that.
I
Well-
think I had the same concern about setting up a whole nother group of people.
Me too.
I did.
Okay.
And I was won over by the idea, and maybe in future it won't be necessary, but I came around to the idea based on kind of a trust building, a feeling of like, okay, we want to get from where we are to where we want to go. And maybe this is the mechanism to do it, even if it's not the most efficient possible. So
Well,
that's
I'll
how I
also say
came.
this
and
isn't a board, it's a committee, right?
It's a committee, it's not a board, right?
It's a group of people getting together.
I mean, it would all be populated by people who are already on boards, and that'd be extra time for people, and I get it. And I was initially hesitant, but I think it might be worth doing at least at first. So that's my take, but I completely understand the concern.
Yeah, again, not to echo, that's exactly my thought. I was just thinking the time element involved too. Sometimes these projects, might be emergency. Well, obviously they'll get together quickly if it's an emergency. I just wondered if this was going to slow everything down, and creating another layer of 2, 2, and 2, and that's my initial thought. I'm gonna take time to digest it. I just was hoping that with all the meetings we've had and the coming together and the trying to pacify everyone that we, and creating the account in the first place.
Yep.
Is enough of a olive branch to just put out there that everybody would make reasonable decisions, but I'll sit back and listen to, other feedback. It just sort of makes a whole nother layer and
Yeah,
What
I
if
mean,
we-
I
Yeah.
think what we should all do is mold this some more. I asked, Shannon can be available. Maybe I can ask if she be available for our next meeting. We can all come back to this issue after having chewed on it for a bit.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of
Robert,
throw
I'm
their ideas
actually,
out. and-
I'm actually in the meeting.
Oh, you did
you
show
need me.
up. Look at you. Okay,
I
well.
did. I just stepped out of the Charter Revision Commission. Sorry, I'll mute myself again.
Well, we're talking about our initial thoughts. Nothing, no big deal. Things have been decided. We're just kind of kicking this around.
Great. I
So-
heard Joanne's comment and yep.
Okay, let's continue. Board of Finance members, other comments, questions, or thoughts?
Yeah, I have my hand up.
Bill?
Yep.
Go ahead,
My hand
Bill.
up. Okay, thank you. I guess my one concern in part C is it starts to clearly define what a major or a capital expenditure is. And then it says at the last sentence, though, that the BOE will make up what is and what isn't. And I just think it should be defined. What is a capital project? Okay. And it should be defined and it should be adhered to. It should be like, well, this time we're going to call it a capital expenditure, but next time we're not. Maybe the next time we will, but the next time we won't. We're going to make up our mind. It just seems like we should have a definition of what a capital project is in there. and it should be adhered to and agreed to.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah, I mean, in principle, I would agree with you 100%. The problem seems to be that in terms of municipal spending, there does not seem to be the same concept of what a capital expenditure might be as opposed to what you and I might have run into in the private sector. You know, is the repairs to the septic system or to the sewer lines or to the seats in the auditorium, are those a capital expenditure? As anybody who's dealt with this in the private sector will know, it's often as much of an art as a science. It's a judgment call on the part of the finance department. They do their best to apply the generally agreed upon accounting principles, which I know there are a set of those for the municipalities and governments, et cetera. I'm not familiar with them. I'm not an accountant, especially with the municipalities, but I think that it seems to be a lot looser, so, I mean, any of the three projects that I mentioned, I would think would be things that we would need to fund out of this type of capital improvement or capital account, but they wouldn't necessarily pass what I would consider for a private enterprise, a capital improvement. They might not. It kind of depends on the.
Sure, I see where you're going with it, Mark.
I can speak to this some more. Shannon and I went round and around on this because there's always fuzziness around the edges of these definitions, and she and I think the Board of Ed in their discussions came up with some thoughts about, hey, wait a minute, let's say we want to do X. Is that going to suddenly be a capital expense whereas we don't really see it that way? I think the example that we talked about at one point was, what if we wanted to buy the kids a bunch of computers? Is that a capital expenditure? Or is that something that we would normally have funded out of our ops budget? So, and all of a sudden now we're into this. So in the end, she came around to the idea of creating this committee and then letting the committee call it as they see it, rather than, or how she drafted it here, rather than trying to really put it in a box. I preferred, initially we came into this like, okay, we got to define it. And I still would, I think in a perfect world, I'd like a definition, but every time I sat down to try and write one, and especially, poring over Connecticut state statutes as to what boards of ed are empowered to do and what their responsibilities are, I had real trouble coming up with a good definition.
Yeah,
And I
it's
felt
problematic, and I think,
problems.
I think again that we would be generally, and this applies to the entire town government budget too, we should be very careful about boxing ourselves into too much of a corner. Now, I know this is a policy. It's not the charter or something we have to legally follow necessarily, but I think we should use it as our guiding principle. So I think it's important that we get it right. And I think that's right. The computer is actually a really, really good example, Rob, because, historically, private companies would capitalize things like personal computers and laptops because they cost a lot of money and they had a 3 to 5 year lifespan, if not longer. Now they don't cost so much, right? So companies actually lease them, they expense them. We do that all the time. So things change. It's a tough call. But I think we need to probably reserve the ability of the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to agree that, hey, buying computers for the kids or for a classroom or for a specific thing or repairing the septic system is a capital expense. Paying the school nurse is not. That's an expense. It's an ongoing expense. It clearly is an ongoing thing. So we probably need to give them the latitude. This can always be turned down, right? So Bill, your hand's still up, is that?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay.
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm touching the wrong screen. I'm looking at two screens trying to close the wrong one.
Mark, I think actually the town's definition of what capital should be less than that, because it's clear that the Board of Ed, if it's related to operations of the school, and I would say computers would be an operation it may be a capital item because it's over a threshold, but that is not something either CIP or any tri-board should be weighing in on.
Why do you think that?
Because it's clear that the town is the owner of the building, the structure and the grounds.
So you're talking about a terms of a length of service then potentially.
Right, well, but we're not, that would be the personal property of the school, not that's not a building or it's not a ground. So I don't think the town has any or should have any oversight over that whatsoever. Either Board of Finance or a tribe. That's a school board's. Where the town has a dog in the fight is building and grounds, and major projects that affect either of those only. Everything else is the school board's discretion.
Eric, I don't want to.
Well, this wouldn't prevent the school board from ordering laptops if they have it in their budget to purchase for the kids. But it would, what if they did not have that in their budget and they needed to replace that? And
Mark,
they
then
wanted
we're
to tap the capital fund and,
Well, that needs to be in there.
I just want to make a comment that I feel like
Go ahead,
then
John.
we're opening, sorry, I just been waiting a couple minutes to get my
Go ahead.
thought, out, and Eric kind of said it. I can't agree with him more. I feel like then we're opening the whole AES budget process to just changing, which isn't a bad thing, but we definitely did this to make sure that we could fund or start a fund for, like Eric said, the buildings, the grounds, the big projects. I feel, and I hope, I'm not making a decision tonight, that we definitely can define it in some way. I understand in the business world and out there's different things that can be added. But I felt like this was building structure, things, they've somehow found a way to plan nicely for all of those other kinds of things that are in the operational, budget every year. And computers have been there. They brought in, from way back when I moved here, they had brought out their plan. They've done that nicely. They've replaced them. They have all of that. That scares me if I really don't want to go in that direction. I'm 100% Eric with this thought.
Right, and that was exactly what Shannon was getting at when she was saying, if we define it in kind of a clunky way, then you somehow that somehow gets included when it shouldn't be. That's instructional, right? That's for the kids. That's absolutely the Board of Ed's call. Not, we shouldn't be monkeying around with that. So that was why she ultimately pulled a definition out of here. If we can come up with one that doesn't cause these kinds of problems, great. But I kind of see her point in that no matter how we define it, at least when I was trying to draft, there were these potential issues that arise. And so it may be more that we need to have discretion available within the policy. That's all.
And Mark's made it clear too, that it is a policy. And if there is going to be a subcommittee or a committee, it doesn't mean people can't bring an idea forward. We just probably should have a clear idea of what we think should go forward. Yeah, and I remember being at a meeting too, where Ann Cremay had made a point that before they had this policy, somehow they had to save money, or, they used to take care of a few capital things out of the operational, maybe what was left over, or because, the business manager had done a good job getting discounts. So this is freeing for that. They can now use the whole operational instructional for those kind of things. It's just my thought. And then clearly have a different kind of idea in mind for the capital projects and capital account. That's the way I see it. I wouldn't want to see computers in there at all.
Other comments?
So one of the concerns I would have with this is if you do a literal reading of this, it says the Board of Ed may choose to deposit money into the account. And I don't think that's really technically correct. I mean, per the charter, they can ask the Board of Finance
Yeah,
But
they may request transfer, so,
It is,
so that third line probably ought to be, the Board of Ed may request transfer of unspent money from the Board of Education, so you add the term request, right? Is that
So.
what- That address what you're concerned about, Eric?
You finish, Eric. Sorry.
Yep.
I don't know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kimberly. I don't want to dominate this. Go ahead.
I think for me, I looked at this as a revised draft. But there was another draft of this, correct? That happened before this. This is a revision?
Yeah, this is
By
this
the
is a
Board of
complete
Education?
rewrite.
Okay, so I personally need to take a look at that first copy. And then I'm gonna want to sit and look back at some of the meetings that were held on how this all originated, so I can get a feel for the changes and, you know, what the purpose of this is. So right now, I can't make a decision about any of this. I'm gonna want to do some research and maybe think about this in June.
Yeah, I think it's not urgent, and I would agree that just in general, we all have time to think about it a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know if you're gonna glean that much insight from going back and looking at it, because the original draft, the original policy was very, very different in orientation. It
Is
was a lot more detailed, frankly, but, you know, we had a lot of the same concerns. How do you
is there,
define a capital project? Who gets to approve it? You know, who controls the money, kind of thing. So,
is there a way to have taken the first policy and put this into track changes so you can actually compare?
I think it's a complete
It's a-
rewrite. They're
it's
not
a
even
it's
close.
total
completely
rewrite.
different?
This is not a
Okay.
red
Two
line.
different
This is a
documents.
complete rewrite.
Okay.
However, Kimberly, I mean, if you want me to dig up the last draft I had before this and email it to you, I could do that.
Okay.
But it's wildly different.
Mhm.
This really kind of conceptually is a different policy at this point.
Okay. Okay.
You know, than the original draft. We've been kicking this around a while.
Right,
So
right.
the other thing I would mention, by the way, vis-a-vis section 1B, and I may be garbling this, and I'll defer to others to explain it better. But you know how the Board of Ed has that 2% non-lapsing account, and they can put money in there, but you know, they come and they can request it from us. Apparently, the state legislature just passed a new omnibus education bill that comes down over top of that and says that it's entirely their call what
Okay.
to do with the surplus.
What's entirely in whose call?
The Board of Ed. You know, in the past, if they had money left over, right? Up
Oh,
to the-
right.
They'd have to
Yeah,
come to us
yeah,
and ask
yeah,
for permission, or they'd have to return it to the town.
Mhm.
Apparently, the new ed bill changes that, and so that's something to consider when we think about 1B. I think
these are two different funds. We're not talking
they are.
about
It is true.
2% non-lapsing account.
yeah. It's a good point.
That's
It's a different
true.
call.
That's true.
And in fact, the school, you could take money with the AES school board's permission, because they control that fund. If their school board decided to spend that money on a capital project, per our auditor, that would be legal as long as it's a school-related capital project. So my assumption is, given if the governor does sign that into law, then more than likely in the future, the school is gonna max out their 2% non-lapsing account every year, because why wouldn't they? That gives them the most flexibility. And then the question becomes, what happens with any additional money that the school board wants to deposit into the straight capital account, which they don't control?
Gotcha.
Other questions or comments? All right, so I would suggest that we spend some time reviewing this, thinking about it, take it up at our next meeting, and pursue it then. Agreed? Okay. Move on to item 5B, which is the review of budget to actual.
Are you gonna share your screen, Mark, or?
No, I don't have anything in there. We have the check register. I don't know, Eric, if you want to.
Do you want me to share my screen, for the budget to actual?
You know, it's almost, we're not going to sit here and go through it line by line. I guess the question would be, does anybody have any concerns over the package that was submitted?
No.
Eric, looking at property tax revenue, we're about 235K short. Do we feel pretty comfortable on that?
Yeah, actually, I think this has been a fairly good collections month. So I think we're gonna be okay overall.
We should have gotten the quarter's taxes, most of the receipts by now, right?
Yeah,
And we're not going to hit the rest of them by the end of the, well, maybe a lot of them, but
no, I think we're okay. But we will see.
okay. Any areas of concern from you, Eric? I don't see anything else personally, but
No, I spent last week, I spent, 3 or 4 hours with Cheryl going over the budget line by line. I think we're well under overall. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of line items that are over. And I think Cheryl should be prepared to discuss that with you at the next board meeting.
well, that will be our last meeting in this fiscal year. So we need to be prepared to do the transfers that are required to manage that, right?
You should do them by the end of the year. If you don't, it's not the end of the world that you do them in July. But yeah, because I mean, technically, per the auditor, you're not going to have every single bill for every single line item by July 1 anyway. Even if you request them.
But you might
you could
have a
certainly
good
have to-
idea, at least if we don't have the transfers next month, then we would have a good idea, I would think, Eric, right, of, yeah. Okay,
Well, it's probably true that it really doesn't have much impact on the closing of the accounts or anything, right? So
That's
mean-
correct.
that's really probably something Cheryl should address in the next meeting. Let us know what she needs us to do to make sure she can close efficiently and effectively.
Correct.
Other questions on budget to actual?
Mhm.
Okay, take a look at it when you get a chance, and we can always refer to it in the next meeting. Check register is also there. Any questions on the comments on the check register?
I guess just one quick question, Eric, how many times? I should remember this, I've asked it before, but how many times a year does the MRF payment get made? That could be a Cheryl question too, I just,
That's a Cheryl question.
yeah. I'll
Do I
remember.
send them every month?
It is
Yeah,
every
I
month?
guess it's every month, but
It's monthly.
that's what I was thinking.
I know it's not bi-weekly. It's not
No,
with
they
every
said-
pay
okay.
period, but I think it's monthly.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, well, hearing none, we will go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which is the new business. New business item 5A is to set the mill rate.
Mhm.
So.
Do we have in front of us, if I can ask, sorry, Mark,
Hmm?
that last, from the budget meeting, that one page that shows the mill rate and the calculations and all of that? Is
Eric, if you want to let me share my screen, I'll pop it up there, or if
Just
you
that
have it
one
up, you can
page
pop it up
while
there.
I can do either.
So
So
if you
you should
have
be
it, go
able
ahead
to
and
share
share
your
it.
screen now.
What's that?
I said you should be able to share your screen now. If you don't want to, I can.
Loading, there it is, okay. All right, you should be seeing this.
Right,
Are you seeing it?
yes,
Okay.
yes, yep. Got it.
So this was the spreadsheet that we shared at the town meeting.
Mhm.
Nothing changed in that interim. So what the calculated mill rate was 31.46,
Mhm.
seen in cell F17, which I'll highlight here in orange for your viewing pleasure.
Mhm.
Comments or questions?
No, I appreciate it. I just wanted to see
Yep.
it and, you
No,
know,
we need to have that in front of us so we can.
right.
What we need now then is a motion to set the mill rate at 31.46 for the fiscal year 2024-2025.
I'll make the motion that we make
And
the
I'll
mill rate
second it.
31.46 for the year 24-25.
Okay, and I heard Rob second. Any discussion? Thankfully, I'm hearing none. We'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Just on a personal note, thank you to the Board of Finance and everyone else who did the hard work to get this through. Unfortunately, it was not very controversial this year and we got it through and the town seemed to agree. Okay. Looks
Mark,
like the motion passes.
can you do me a favor?
Yep.
And can you send me your copy of that document?
I
Because
will just-
the document I have with the same date has it as, I have it as 31.48. So we seem to be off about $4,000 between your copy and my copy. But since you guys approved your copy, we'll go with that and I'll just delete mine.
Okay.
Wait, are we sure? Wait, which one's right?
It's
Well,
always been
I'm gonna review the
31.46.
presentation.
Yeah,
I mean, I remember it being the one you put up, Mark, but you know,
yeah.
just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, my computer's getting slow. I think it's time for a new one. And the email from Microsoft, your computer is not eligible for Windows 11.
It's always got a lag when you're in the middle of trying to show somebody something.
Yeah,
Of course.
it's actually been pretty good, but it's
Could be
Another
worse.
capital
Be
expense for
using
your company,
Teams.
Mark.
this thing is like 9 years old and it's served me very well.
It's another capital expense for your company, Mark.
I don't think my company's going to be paying for this one though.
Oh, they're not. Okay.
This is my personal computer. Are you guys seeing the file?
Mm-mm.
No,
No,
Sorry,
here it
how about
goes.
now?
there it is.
Okay.
There it is. Yep, that's from the PowerPoint. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. That's the one that was
Yeah.
approved. So
I'll send
just,
it to you. I wanted to verify it against the PowerPoint, but we just ended up doing it. So I will send that to you as soon as the meeting's over.
yeah, and we only differ by 4,000, so I don't really care either way.
Must be a rounding error. A rounding differential. I won't call it an error because rounding happens. Okay,
It's just a five.
now we have item 5B. This is to address the email from Celeste about the request to transfer the 103,000 into the, actually, I should say, request of the Board of Education to transfer the 103,000 into the non-lapsing account.
Actually, wait.
No, I
Not
think
non-lapsing account.
No, into the capital fund.
AES capital.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Capital
capital.
fund.
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to pull this up. I'm just going to go ahead and share this since I have the,
Mhm.
while you're doing that, I mean, I can make the motion so we have it on the table.
Are you guys seeing the letter from the
Yes.
Board of Ed? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the letter we all received from the Board of Ed requesting the allocation of the surplus $103,000 to the Andover Elementary School Capital Fund, which we established earlier. In this case, they happen to call out specifically for their concerns about upgrading them, or I shouldn't say upgrading the plumbing, actually repairing the plumbing at the school. Does anybody have any discussion, or do you want to make a motion?
I think Rob said he's gonna make a motion.
Yeah, I'm gonna move that we approve this request and move the 103,000 into the newly established capital fund as per the Board of Ed's request.
Do you have a second?
I'll second it.
Hey, Bill, any further discussion? Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Celeste.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Celeste.
Thanks.
Good
Bye,
luck with
Celeste.
coming.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, everyone, and happy Memorial Day weekend. Thank you. Bye.
Same to you.
So,
Yeah, that's
Bye.
right.
Bye.
Keep forgetting. Okay, and now we will move on to item 5C, which is, help me out here, folks.
We added it.
I think Eric, was it Eric's?
So
Oh, yeah, the electrical expenditures, sorry. Go ahead, Eric, you want to discuss or tell us what this is all about?
Sure. So last year when we set the budget for the current fiscal year, we didn't have a community center and we didn't need to pay electricity for the community center. But we've had the meter on the building now for about a month and a half or 2 months. So now we are paying, and because it's an electrically heated and cooled building, there will be some expenditures this spring for electrical usage, as well as for all the contractors that are in there for. So the first thing would be a motion to create the account 4214 Community Center, line item 3-318-601-56220 electricity. And then the second part of that would be to set an additional appropriation in the amount of $2,000. So basically you have to create the fund, but you can't just transfer money in like you would at the end of the year because that fund doesn't actually exist yet. So you have to create that line item in the budget, in this year's budget. And because it's not in the approved budget, you have to do that as an additional appropriation per the treasurer. So that would be the request.
Eric, so two things. First of all, you said fund, but I think you mean just the account number, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. No,
And can you read the account number again? I mean, we have, I'm looking at the budget, just I want to make sure it lines up.
sure, it should be 4214
Yeah,
318-601-56220.
correct. Okay, that lines up at the 2024, 2025 fiscal budget. So good, we're good there. So it sounds like what we need to do is create the account in the budget. And are we actually going to do a quote appropriation, or are we going to just do a transfer
right.
to cover?
Yeah.
So Cheryl seems to think that should be done with an appropriation, not a transfer. And remember, up to about $25,000 a year, you're free to make, or actually even a little bit more than that. Until you break it's either 0.25% or 0.5% of the budget, you can do appropriations without any other, on your own authority. So, or you could wait until next week or next month and ask Cheryl why she thinks it should be an appropriation and not a transfer.
Rob?
I have a potentially dumb question, but where is the appropriation coming from?
Right.
It's just a supplemental appropriation.
It basically would come from the taxation and any excess or general fund, right? So,
Okay,
That's how we would fund it.
so,
typically.
okay,
My
so instead of,
question, are we adding to the budget then? We can't just this year, dumb question from me too, Rob. I want to
Yeah.
understand it. For $2,000, it seems like I wish we could just do a transfer because Eric had already said we're gonna be well under with the expenses this year. So we can't just have additional, we know we're gonna split it out in the future. And it's gonna be the community center when we have all of those line items active and, you know, the building opens. To me, it's not running as, is there some reason we can't just include it in the town hall's electric, you know, bill for now?
I
Until-
personally would be in favor of creating the account and recording the expenditures in
Yeah.
there, because the sooner we do, the sooner we get a history of kind of what it is every month in June, what it is every month in May, what it is every month in August. So we clearly understand kind of what the operating expenses of the community center are. But to do an additional
I understand that
appropriation, I'm
part.
not sure that
Right.
really, you know,
Yeah.
that I'm not comfortable with that personally at this point, unless we have good reason. We have to fund it. There's no question. right?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I just,
But if we can't do it with a transfer, I'd like to understand why.
right, might as well get educated now. This is
Rob?
perfect opportunity.
you know,
Yeah.
Eric, you were saying this was Cheryl's thought that we should do an appropriation?
Yes, I mean, to be honest, Cheryl would prefer appropriations for everything that's over,
Mm.
so that the budget lines up with what the actual expenses are at the end of the year, and then let everything that's unexpended just flow into fund balance. You know, as opposed to doing transfers for everything. But you know, we've gone back and forth about it. Historically, we've always done them as transfers. You know, but she felt because this was something that wasn't created, you know, already, you know, it has to be a supplemental appropriation because it's a line item that doesn't exist.
I hear you. I guess I don't see why we couldn't create it, and then it exists. Transfers what they get. But
Yeah.
I tell you what, I don't think there's any disagreement that we have to create the line item. So why don't we do that?
Make a
I don't
motion?
remember all the numbers, but I'm happy to make the
Rob?
motion. Yeah, I mean, I move that we create the line item in the budget for the electrical for the community center as per Eric's request.
Yeah, so that was the account number 4214-318-601-56220 electricity.
Mhm.
Any seconds?
I'll second it.
Okay, Kimberly, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'm gonna just abstain. I think we should have expected that there was gonna be some yeah, I'm just, whatever, I'm abstaining. Thank you.
Okay, so Joanne abstains, no opposed. Okay, the motion passes. Okay. So now the question comes before us, do we want to make an appropriation? So if we don't want to make appropriation, that's fine. We just do not make a motion.
Can I be very stupid here?
Yeah, Bill, go ahead.
I just wonder, I'm sorry to be so dumb, but can somebody define appropriation?
Well, it
versus-
basically means the Board of Finance for the charter has a certain authority to appropriate additional monies as needed for the town business, as Eric said, up into a certain percentage. It's fairly small.
Oh, I see.
So it just gives us a little bit of flexibility if we're tight on the budgetary spending through the end of the year. If some, you know, unforeseen circumstance comes up that we can't delay, then we would, you know, we could in theory just appropriate that money and it just, you know, would come out of the whatever revenues we have, the tax or the general fund.
Okay, but again, if we're already under, it just seems like it would make more sense just to.
As far as we know, right? So
As far as we know,
it's
okay.
comfortable, but there's everyone that understands, you know, we're.
Eric seems as comfortable, and it just needs to make more sense. We would just make a transfer, but.
And I think it's an accounting, you know, it makes sense that Cheryl's the accounting side. Thank you for explaining, Eric. Cheryl would like it to line up accounting wise. So of course, when you have an appropriation, which it just opens us up to doing this every year and having this be my third year for such a small amount, and we have the money, I agree with, kind of Bill's thought, my thought of, and everybody, just let's transfer it in. We'll create the account if that needs to be. But I feel like, of course, the accounting side would want it to all line up exactly perfect, and I get that. Whereas to me, we're the town organization and or whatever we are, the authority to, I just don't want to have to face this I don't think it's good for the town to have to face it, when we are over and we have the money to transfer. I don't mind appropriating if there's some catastrophe and we have to spend $20,000 to fix the sewer or whatever, so my thoughts. I think it's accounting versus logistics.
How much money do we need again, Eric?
2,000.
2,000 bucks, and that gets us how far? Like,
Hopefully at the end of the year, we don't need to do this again.
that's it. That's the whole year.
Right.
Shouldn't be that
Okay, and then presumably in the next budget cycle, we just funded it that whatever the level that's.
Well, we did. We had that. We had
already
a
took care
budget
of that, yeah.
for this year of $8,000 a year for the annual, for the fiscal year was in the budget. So
Oh, okay.
that's where that number comes from. It comes from the accounts that were created for next year's budget.
This is last year's budget because we're not done with it yet and we've got the meter
Right.
running. So will
Yep.
we just pull this from contingency? Why wouldn't we just pull it from contingency?
Yeah. So you can see the community center accounts right there.
Yeah, okay. We did budget it. Okay, so.
Yeah, we covered
so
it for
this
next
is-
year. We
this-
just haven't
yeah,
covered it for this year because we
just
didn't
the
know. what the-
stopgap for the last couple months, right? Okay.
Right.
So that, I mean, to me, that's contingency, but
Or
You
if we
can-
have the money available, we just transfer it in.
Cheryl.
But everybody has,
You know-
yeah.
And if,
So it sounds like there's not, if nobody's going to make a motion, then I would say that it sounds like we don't have a clear direction on what to move. Unless somebody chooses to make a motion, and you're of course free to do that, but it sounds like maybe the wisest choice is for the board to wait to hear from Cheryl next month, and then we can make the decision.
but don't we owe the money? Well, don't we need to pay the money?
Good.
look, we're gonna pay the bill. It's not a question of that.
Right.
Regardless of what you do, we're still gonna pay our electric bill.
Okay, I want to make sure. Okay.
I can see the
I don't want us
headlines
to
now.
dither and then
Community
be,
center no longer
have
available due
Eversource
to
shutting off
non-payment
our
of
electricity
Right.
because
Thank you,
we're
Board of Finance.
dithering over $2,000 and where to pull it from. I mean, it just seems silly. Okay, so if that's not the issue,
No, we
then
have the money. That's why I have my thought, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think we'll
I'm
have
okay with
more
that.
than that, yeah.
So the real question, and it's more an accounting question, is that instead of at the end of the year, there's two potential ways to do it. It's to look at the budget and say, oh, we were short on these following line items in the budget. Therefore, we were going to increase the appropriation for that line item to match what we already expended. That way, all those line items are in the black. And then everything else just flows back to fund balance at the end of the year. So the final budget at the end of the year shows all expenditures versus transferring the money from one line to the other at the end of the year. That's really what you're talking about.
So there's pluses and minuses to both things. So I'll state what I think are the positives to doing the approach that Cheryl's kind of recommended by adding an appropriation is that you're basically making very clear what budgets were slightly overspent and what budget line items are slightly underspent. And it may help you provide guidance for next year's fiscal year budgeting because you have a good historical record. The downside for me of appropriation is we're adding to the budget. We literally are adding to the budget. And I think Joanne asked the question, or Bill, and asked the question about the differences, but we're actually adding to the budget. And I'm not very comfortable doing that on a routine basis. If it's needed, by all means, I would say, yeah, you know what, we're tight, we're going to go to that. I'm person who likes data. I like to see the history. I like the history to be accurate, but for practical purposes, from a philosophical standpoint, I don't like the Board of Finance routinely just adding to the budget to cover something we didn't foresee, unless it really is required. That's just my personal take on it. And I don't see any reason we can't wait for a month to discuss it and talk with Cheryl and get her perspective, because maybe I've got something wrong, maybe we all do, but So I think those are the kind of the pluses and the minuses. As Eric said, they get you to the same place essentially. But when you're adding to the budget, that money is going to flow into the funds, as opposed to, well, I guess it all ends up, ultimately top line ends up, bottom line ends up being the same. So.
And Mark, every year, historically watching the Board of Ed operate, I'll go to their meetings. They're gonna do some transfers and moving around. We're used to this.
We
in
do
our
a lot, yeah.
town. It's you're never gonna hit it 100% spot on. So that's the nice part. Every year we've been able to. I have historically watched the town be able to purchase things because luckily there has been money left over. Last year we were able to get the SUV. And this year the trailer was bought, so there was, that's all. I agree with you. I don't want to add to the budget at all. I don't think it's necessary. If it was a big catastrophe and we needed, an appropriation, that's where we come into play to do that. And
Or we had to move a lot of money and that would skew
Correct.
things from a historical record perspective. If it was $5,000 or $7,000, I'd say, yeah, let's seriously consider it. I'm not
Mhm.
comfortable doing it right now personally.
Yeah.
For $2,000.
That's all.
I
And then
agree.
So
next year
we'll
the
do it
accounts
as old
created.
business next time.
So,
Say that again, Rob?
So we'll revisit as as old business next time.
Yeah, we just put it on I would say, put it as old business next time if we don't take action tonight.
Well,
It
yeah,
can
I
be,
mean,
it can be added as old business or.
that seems
it
to
can
be
be
the way
left
things
off.
are going. So,
Further comments or discussion? All right, well, hearing no more discussion about this, we can move on to agenda item 6, which is approval of the meeting minutes from March 27th, April 3rd, April 10th, April 17th, and April 24th. I'm not sure if all of us were on that. Of course, even if you weren't at the meetings, you could have participated via, or at least reviewed them by Zoom to validate the minutes. Just looking, it's all there, yeah.
but, as well.
Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes, either individually or as a whole?
I'll make the motion to approve all the minutes.
Okay, Louise makes a motion to approve them. Anybody second?
second,
Kimberly? That's not Kimberly's hand. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
I
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'm going to abstain because I was not there on April 17th, nor did I review them. So, okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. Item 7 is administrator's report. Eric?
Okay, the report is in my packet. Is anybody in the packet? So I won't go over everything. Relative to the Board of Finance, there are a couple grant submissions that are in currently. I think I already announced it, but we did get the LOTSIP grant for the Route 316 connectivity project. That's a $2.85 million award of construction.
Woohoo.
So that's good. The other thing I did submit is I submitted for a congressional appropriation through Senators Murphy and Blumenthal's office for about $410,000. That money would be spent to complete the community center as well as install the backup generator for the municipal campus. So if we do get that grant, it will be 3/4 funded by the federal government, and we'll have to pick up the last quarter of it, which is $105,000 roughly. But since we already have money that has already been earmarked for finishing the community center,
No town meeting or anything, right? Yeah.
is spend the same amount of money we've already agreed to spend, but also get the generator completed at the same time, if that comes through. So I'm, cautiously optimistic for that. HVAC work on the town hall is mostly complete, although when I sit in my office, it's still about 85 degrees because they haven't got the ductless split for the upstairs working yet, which is unfortunate. But the rest of it's all working. Propane tanks are installed. The other thing we did meet at the elementary school last week with a MEP, which is an engineer that specializes in mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. And I'm hoping by the end of the week back to have a initial proposal for a cost estimate for doing the design for the repair work necessary for the AES plumbing issues.
Do we have any idea whether that's budgetarily in scope of what we've already got in that capital fund? I mean, do you have an idea of the, scale of it? Is it, is it 50,000, 200,000, 500,000? Can't be cheap.
I'm sure it's over 100,000 because basically what's gonna have to happen is there's a long cast iron pipe that runs the length of the old wing that has rotted out in several places.
So it'll need to be dug up.
Well, that part is run in a chase, so that is accessible. But the laterals, which are the parts that run to the urinals and the bathrooms themselves, those are in the slab. And they're, what they are is pretty unclear. If we're going to do this, so the long and the short of it is we're going to end up jackhammering out part of the slab in 3 separate bathrooms. So that's not going to be inexpensive. Because this building looks like most of it's the original tile, you might as well commit to retiling the bathrooms. One of the bathrooms can be fairly easily made ADA accessible. 2 of them cannot, just because of their layout. They're not ADA accessible now, and when we get done renovating them, they're still not going to be ADA accessible without moving walls and reconfiguring the adjacent rooms to them. There's not really any way to make it. So the MEP also has an architect that will be helping with it, because wherever we can be ADA accessible and compliant, we should be. So that's basically the scope of the project.
Are we required to become ADA compliant with a renovation, or does this not meet the standard of that type level of renovation?
No, we shouldn't be required to. Schools have some minimum requirements for ADA accessibility, but because the other wings have that, every single bathroom does not need to be ADA accessible. There are minimum ADA requirements that the building already meets. If it were a new bathroom, it would have to be ADA accessible.
Yeah.
But for renovation, no.
And it makes sense. If it were simple to do, we should do it, but if it's not simple to do, we don't want to go down that path. Okay.
Right. Yes.
Rob, got a question?
Quick question for you, Eric, just to clarify, make sure I understand. What you're expecting at the end of the week is the proposal for the amount of money it'll take to do the engineering work, to do the plan.
Design and engineering services to come up with a plan to do
Right.
it.
Not to actually, we're not gonna know the price tag for the whole thing. We're gonna know what it'll cost us to get the price
Well, we
tag.
ought to have a budgetary quote out of it, I would think, at least.
Yeah, we can get a real ballpark, but we're not going to really know well until we go to RFP and actually get bids back on this.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to make clear, because we're not getting the full project price here. We're getting what it's gonna take us to get there.
Right. We're still trying to make sure we know what the actual full scope of work we have to do is. And as we went over the project, I mean, one of my concerns was that there's, I want them to look we know the waste, the drain waste end of the plumbing has severe problems. They haven't had any problems on the supply end, but I also wanted an evaluation of that because, at the point where we're busting through concrete, and we're committing to redoing the flooring, you know, I want this to be, whatever we do, I want this to be one and done. And I don't want to be revisiting this in 10 years and doing something more. I'm
Or
trying to
6
keep the
months.
scope
Yeah.
as controlled as I possibly can and not get any more scope creep than is necessary. But I also want to make sure we get our hands around the whole problem and we fix it.
You know, even if we just have a plan like, hey, in the next 5 years, you're gonna need to replace some of these supply components. We can plan for that. We can start funding the capital fund for that. Okay,
So that is something that I've been in discussion with that engineering firm. And it's a discussion we've had fairly extensively at CIP. Because unlike most of the town buildings, we don't really have a full-blown capital plan for the buildings. And ultimately, we're going to need somebody to evaluate kind of that building comprehensively and all the building systems, so we can really understand what our expenses are going to be going forward. So my goal is to get a contractor or an engineer, assign them this project, and if this works well and we get a good product out of them, to consider starting to do over the next, say, 5 years. Take each mechanical systems 1 year, electrical systems the next, and just review the whole building so we have.
kind of the capital improvement plan we've been talking about for AES.
Yeah, that makes
for
a lot
while.
of sense. How else
Yep.
are we gonna do a capital improvement plan if we don't actually understand the existing infrastructure?
Yeah, it'd be good to have that. Yeah.
That is,
Exactly.
yeah. But remember, that is not cheap, and we're not going to want to do that all at once.
Right. Well, that's why you have a plan, right? The multi-year plan.
Correct.
Okay, other questions for Eric, or Eric, do you have anything else? Most of the other stuff looks pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I guess we can move on then to item 8, which is the liaison reports.
CIP was pretty straightforward. Recently, the thing we talked about was a library project, which doesn't take any money from the town. They have it all funded through donation. But there was extensive discussion nonetheless. Eric can speak to this a lot more intelligently than I can. But they've got a bathroom they want to redo a bit, and it involves a window they want to close up. And there was a bunch of discussion about how best to do that. Eric raised some, I think, good concerns about their initial plan. So there was a substantial, I think, revision going to be made to that plan. I don't know, Eric, if in the intervening time there's been any further developments, but there was a little window, and the issue was if you put a file cabinet up against what used to be a window, and they wanted to just kind of plaster over it or something like that, and there was some concern about it getting condensation and creating a mold problem. Eric, is there anything that's come up since then on that?
Sure. I walked and talked that with Martin of MG Masonry to look at it. You know, and he basically said, you know, his preference would be exactly what we talked about, which is brick it up and then plaster it on the inside and the outside. So you make that a permanent fix, and you just essentially remove the existing window, brick in the opening, and then do whatever you want on the inside. The library board was going to go back to Golden Hammer, which was the contractor they had picked for the project, and ask them with it whether that was something they wanted to tackle or whether they wanted Martin to handle that. I have not.
Is there an egress issue?
What?
Is there a means of egress issue there in that situation?
No.
That's not an openable window anyway.
Oh, okay.
So
Like a
I-
cellar
It's like
window.
it's like one of
Like a
these
cellar
little.
window.
Probably not in a living area. It probably doesn't come into play, right? I don't know the code that
Yeah.
well.
No,
Okay.
but the other thing that they're going to be within budget, right? Like we talked about it at CIP. We approved some money, and I mean it's their money anyway. It was sort of pointless, but they're not going to go over, are they?
No, they should be okay. and the Board of Finance did, you know,
Board
Jeff
of-
McGuire sent
Jackie.
around a vote of the Board of, correction,
Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen did agree to give the green light to that project, so I did notify them. Tomorrow, they should be sending me documents to review. So,
Okay.
we'll go from there.
But that was the only thing really. I don't think there was anything that impacts the town budget that we talked about. Well, correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. Any other liaison reports? I don't think we have any other direct liaisons currently.
Actually, Louise,
Louise,
I
go
had
ahead.
I had a meeting last night with the Norton Commission, and we were thinking about trying to make more of a presence in town, because a lot of people are not aware of the Norton Commission and how effective they are. So we were thinking possibly of doing something at when and if there will be a dedication at this the new senior community center. And I was just kind of curious, Eric, if you happen to know if anything's planned for a dedication.
Well, we kind of did that already, but was that groundbreaking I'm thinking of, Eric?
Yeah, that was a groundbreaking.
We did a groundbreaking. I made a suggestion to the board that they consider around basically the week after the 4th of July for a dedication for the building. But they did not pass anything or make any specific dates or recommendations at their last meeting. So there is nothing definite at this point.
Okay, if there is something going to be definite, is that something that we can share? I mean, is there someone that we have to discuss to allow us to go ahead and do something like have a table there? Would I be talking to that committee?
I would talk to Jeff McGuire on that one. I don't think it
Okay.
should be an issue, but it's not. That wouldn't necessarily, I don't think that would be my call.
All right, so Jeff would be the person. Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions or liaison reports? Okay, any board open discussion? Anything else we need to bring before the board?
Mark, I just wanted to say one thing. I will not be at the next Board of Finance meeting. Cheryl said she will fill in with me. I'm going to be on vacation for a couple weeks at the end of June. I should be available again around July 1st.
Okay, thank you. Well, since you brought that up, I will say exactly the same thing. I will not be
26th.
Me too. No kidding. I'm just-
Sorry, Mark, I
In my
apologize.
head.
The 26th that we're talking about?
I'd have to look at the
I
calendar.
thought it's the 19th and I might not be available that night either.
That's why I've had it in my phone as the 26th, but I had a doubt. That's why I asked.
It's the
Usually
third
the
week. which-
board, Right?
It's the
be the
third
19th.
week. That should be the 19th then. I've got it in the wrong place. Thank you.
It is,
No, it's on the calendar as the 26th.
Oh,
The
that's
reason,
right.
the
That's
reason
the
it's
fourth week.
18th is that is Juneteenth. That is a
Juneteenth, yeah.
state holiday, and you
Yeah.
can't hold a meeting per FOIA on that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good. I can go to New Hampshire riding snowmobiles or quads.
if you're riding snowmobiles, it's going to be a very interesting weather experience. I'll be in Norway. I'll be in Norway at that time. I'll have a much better chance of riding snowmobiles than you will.
You will.
Oh, enjoy that. That sounds cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward. Okay, well, that's going to be interesting then. So we'll have to determine whether we have a quorum. Hopefully we will.
26th we will. I will be there.
I'll be
Okay,
there.
good, good. Okay, any other board open discussion? Okay, I don't have any correspondence other than the two items we already took up today, one of which was the proposed policy and the other was the request to transfer the $103,000 into the capital fund. Anybody else have any correspondence that they should present before the board?
I know.
Okay, next item is public speak. I don't see anybody from the community out there, the public. Okay, and the next item is adjournment. I will say thank you for, I'm not sure if you guys are hearing me well while I was at the dentist earlier, right before this meeting. So my
Couldn't
my
tell.
words are a little thick. I can blame allergies in the dentist, but they're great. It wasn't too egregious, but never the favorite thing to do.
Right.
Fun.
Okay, so the next item, what's that?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, Rob moves to adjourn.
Second,
I see Bill raise his hand in a second. Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor? Say aye.
I-
All those opposed? Hearing none. Any abstentions? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.